welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of South Carolina.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for December the 6th, episode number 1369, where in just a few minutes, we will be joined by the hardest working man on the Gamecock recruiting beat. That is Hale McGranahan from thebigspur.com. He will be joining us to talk Portal Palooza, high school recruiting, and a whole lot more. Looking forward to spending about 30 minutes with Hale today. Then we will be joined by Sumter Link and Bryce Hedgecock, the hosts of the Gamecock Basketball Only podcast, to preview tonight's monumental matchup with Clemson. Gamecocks, by virtue of Grand Canyon knocking off San Diego State last night, making a move in the net rankings. Gamecocks up to number 29 in the real-time RPI, up to number 19, and up 3 places in the KenPom right now at 51. Clemson, of course, by virtue of knocking off Alabama, they are ranked 20th in the coaches poll and number 24 by the Associated Press. This will be a great measuring stick game and an opportunity for Lamont Paris to get another quad one win here in the non-con. All right, to a couple of pieces of breaking news. For whatever reason, and God help me, I don't know why, Mario Anderson will enter the transfer portal. Also, Grayson Maines now entering the transfer portal. That puts the Gamecocks up to number 7. The number of Gamecocks to enter the transfer portal is now at 17. Mario Anderson, I don't know what his deal is, but I can only think that there are bigger fish out there in the transfer portal for South Carolina, for Shane Beamer. You know, this time last week, there was a lot of angst and consternation about all these guys that were leaving. Certainly, you don't like to see Juice Wells leaving. You don't like to see Mitch Jeter leaving. Quite frankly, I didn't really want to see Kawan Banks leave because, quite frankly, and I know I don't know more than Clayton White, but sometimes I kind of feel like I do. And every time that guy got out there, he made plays, okay? You couldn't cover anybody in the slot against North Carolina. You rolled him out there. He got a big interception. Then he didn't play again for about 6 weeks. So another piece of news, former Gamecock special teams coach and linebackers coach under Will Muschamp has spent the last 2 years at Alabama coaching outside linebackers and being the special teams coach there after being the co-defensive coordinator at Texas. He has been named Mississippi State's defensive coordinator today. So there is that. All right, so today's show is brought to you by BP Skinner Clothiers, located in the heart of the Vista. Nobody does it better than my man Brent Skinner. He's been serving customers for decades. He opened up this, went out on his own, opened up his own store. I mean, now it's located in the heart of the historic Vista. This is a Gamecock-owned and operated business. I'm wearing my Garnet Holderness and Bourne pullover. They've got a great selection of Gamecock polos, pullovers, and caps. The Imperial Gray caps in particular are awesome. Last time I was in town, I went by and picked up a black pullover with the garnet circle and the Block C Gamecock in it. I love that one. Wore it on the sidelines pregame and in the stands for the Kentucky game, and the black Imperial cap. So whatever your clothing needs, sport coats, slacks, custom-made dress shirts, ties, shoes, they got you covered at BP Skinner Clothiers, located in the heart of the Vista. I highly encourage all of you to go out and support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. All right, so we are going to be joined by Hale McGranahan in just a couple of minutes. He's running a little bit late, probably because of this breaking news. So let's take this pause for the cause, and we'll be back after this commercial message. Don't go anywhere. We're just getting started. Get your questions in when we come back. If Hale's not in, I'm going to start answering questions. We'll be back right after this.
If you enjoy listening and watching the Free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from TheBigSpur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter at KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter at GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPodDaily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, we are back. Let's go into Let's go out on the guest line. Perfect timing as our guy, the hardest working man I know in the recruiting business. It's a big hail yes for Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur. And he's got to be loving his San Francisco 49ers right now after that epic beatdown on Dawn Staley's Philadelphia Eagles. Hale, good afternoon. The portal never sleeps. Just like my Gordon Gecko said, money never sleeps. The portal never sleeps. Mario Anderson and Grayson Maines, 2 more guys in the portal, and we really did not expect Anderson. We thought he might tinker around with the NFL. Just right off the top, your reaction to that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll say that. I don't know what that means, if there's anything to read into as far as position coach or things of that nature. But yeah, it's been an interesting half hour or so. Sorry for being a little tardy, but here we are. That went on Sunday feels like 3 weeks ago, not 3 days ago. Just given all the action that's transpired with my work.
Yeah, I mean, the portal never sleeps. Obviously, I guess a week ago on Monday, the Juice Wells stuff had leaked out, I think Sunday night or Monday. Everybody's up in arms. Then Mitch Jeter. Then, the message board mafia comes in. Everybody's leaving. Everybody sucks. Fire everybody. We need to leave the SEC. And I'll say this. Mario Anderson proved to be a very valuable player, Hale. And so let's jump right in it, because I promised I'd only keep you 30 minutes today, and we're already in it. So obviously there's a huge name that just popped up that was rumored last year to go in the portal. Rocket Sanders from Arkansas. Obviously, there are connections with Dowell Loggins, a potential Jimmy Smith, bringing him home. There's a lot of speculation out there. What can you tell us on one Raheem Rocket Sanders, who was recruited by Will Muschamp's staff as a wide receiver out of Rockledge, Florida, where my Uncle Doug used to live when he was retired from the Air Force and was a government contractor, right outside of Daytona Beach. He chose Arkansas. He's had a hell of a career, been banged up. South Carolina's not going to spend big on a quarterback, but how big could they spend on Rocket Sanders? So I'm saying, is there a chance?
I don't know how much they'd be willing to shell out. That's not my area of knowledge or expertise, but there's going to be a lot of competition for him. I know South Carolina is going to be interested, and they're going to make a run at him, but whether or not that turns up fruitful, that's a whole different story. I think that it's safe to say that he will be highly coveted by a lot of folks, and those guys typically can command some money. The portal is a weird thing to try to prognosticate, given what you're alluding to, Keith, is the financial element of it. And when you're a top tier guy, you can command top tier money, and there are a lot of programs out there, as we know, that are able to pay top tier money, and South Carolina isn't necessarily one of them. So, from all I've heard from JC and what it looks like the Garnet Trust has been able to do with their side of things, it seems like things are in a better place this year than they were a year ago when South Carolina was trying to add guys from the portal. How much better? Again, I don't know. I don't know the dollar amounts, and I certainly don't know what South Carolina would be willing to pay for a really good running back or a really good player at any position. So we'll just have to wait and see. My unsolicited advice to Carolina fans is to just temper your expectations with this guy and just hope for the best and see where it goes from there.
All right, so honestly, to me, it's kind of like the NFL. Like, I would say you got to go out and definitely restock your wide receiver room. And in today's college game, there's a lot of running backs in the portal. You can get running backs. I mean, Mario Anderson, look at Missouri. Their transfer came from Division II. Certainly, they had a much better offensive line than South Carolina.
Yeah.
I think you can get running backs, but let's deal with the skill positions. So outside of Rocket Sanders, who would only have 1 year and has a history of injuries, there is Don Chaney Jr., who also has a history of injuries. He played as a true freshman, then spent the next 2 years medical red shirts. Then this year he played. Is he still coming in on his visit, listed now at 5'10", 215? And I think they would have to get all the medicals and do a serious battery of tests on him because of his injury history.
Yeah, I don't know if that's definitely still on or not. There's, like you said, been some injury history, which is known. Like that wouldn't be breaking news to the South Carolina staff. So we'll see. There's been some chatter that he is coming in this weekend, but I have not confirmed whether or not that's still on the books or not.
All right, so 2 guys from Charlotte, one who has spent his time at Ohio State, and he has been injured, Evan Pryor, 5'11", 200. He's got 2 or 3 years of eligibility. And then there's Dylan Smothers, 5'11", 190 from Charlotte, who spent this past year at Oklahoma. He would have 4 years as a red shirt. What do you think about those 2 Charlotte guys, Dylan Smothers and Evan Pryor?
Yeah, they were both pretty highly recruited out of high school. Obviously, if you're at Oklahoma or Ohio State as a running back, you're probably a really good recruit, right? So Smothers, I don't know if he played at all. I'd have to go back and check, but if he played any this season for the Sooners, it wasn't much, and I don't think Pryor's really done a whole lot either during his career. For me, I think it would be best if you're South Carolina to get some guys who have proven themselves in college, that have produced. Chaney hasn't produced a ton, but there's something there. Like we've seen him do it. Some of these other guys that South Carolina could be in on have produced at the college level. Mario Anderson, even though it was at Newberry, produced at the college level, going back to last year's turn through the portal. So to me, I think it's probably more important, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to find guys who have done it, given what's in the room. Mario Anderson on the way out. So you're talking about a DJ Braswell who played a little bit, Juju McDowell who's played some, but he's obviously not an every down back and he's coming off an injury. Then Matthew Fuller who's committed, who would be a true freshman. So that's a lot of inexperience in that room right now as it stands. So again, to me, I would think that getting some guys with some experience should be an important factor for the staff as they go through this process. And I don't know that that's necessarily how it's going to turn up. I mean, that they may, move on one or both of those guys for all I know, Pryor or Smothers. But it just, my opinion, just kind of looking at it, I think guys with some experience and production in the college game should be valued a little bit higher is what I'm trying to say.
All right, so let me give you 3 names. Marcus Carroll, 5'11", 215 from Georgia State. He would be a grad transfer with 1 year. Elijah Green at North Carolina, 5'11", 210. He would have 2 years of eligibility. And Deion Hankins, 6 foot 225 from UTEP. He would have 1 year. What about those guys? Those are guys that have definitely produced on the college level.
Yeah, we've heard Carroll would be a name. I don't know for sure if Green's in the portal yet or not. And then the UTEP guy, I'm not too familiar with at this point, Keith.
All right. Good enough. All right, so let's talk about wide receivers. This weekend, excuse me, Gamecocks are set to host, it looks like 3 wide receivers. Jaden McGowan from Lawrence, who you know well. He's spent the last 2 seasons at Vandy. He's been very productive, not only as a wide receiver, but as a punt and kickoff returner. I think he would be an upgrade to Amarian Brown in the slot. Jared Brown from Coastal, who would have 2 years, 6 foot 190, who's been very productive. And then the guy that I think I like the best is Cyrus Allen, 6'1", 180 from Louisiana Tech. It seems like every year there are just guys that pop up that were under the radar high school guys from the state of Louisiana, and they go to a mid-major college. And you're like, where the hell did that guy come from? Look at those highlights. And it seems like he's pretty fired up about the Gamecocks because he said he wanted to see South Carolina before any place else. It seems to be that guys that make their first visit, when they do, by and large, that ends up being the choice most of the time, not every time. But what do you think about these 3 guys that are coming in this weekend?
Yeah, Brown from Coastal is the most productive, I believe, in terms of the stats. He's been a good player for them, not only as a receiver, but as a rusher as well. Cyrus Allen has spent the last 2 seasons at Louisiana Tech, like you said, and the numbers aren't, like off the charts, eye-popping or anything like that, but they're pretty solid. I mean, I think they spread the ball around a good bit, and as far as where he ranked this season in Conference USA statistically, he was top 10 in receptions and yards and in each of those categories. And I think one of his teammates was also top 10 in those numbers, and yards per catch. Again, same thing, top 10. And I think he had at least a teammate who was top 10. So he was one of a few guys who was getting a lot of touches. So have not watched much of either of those guys, or really any of either of those guys. I guess I've seen Brown. I've watched some Coastal games over the last few years, obviously, and don't really have any distinct memories of him. but I'm sure they're pretty good players because they've got some pretty strong suitors in the portal. And then McGowan, who I'm much more familiar with, is he's been somewhat productive at Vanderbilt. A lot of his numbers were put up against Group of Five FCS teams, so he was able to get some decent looking stats that way. And this season in particular, they kind of fell off as they got into SEC play, but that's probably as much as anything a reflection of just kind of Vanderbilt being Vanderbilt and getting into a tougher schedule and everybody having a hard time to put up numbers. Plus, Will Shepard, his teammate, was their A1 guy at receiver, so he commanded more touches and targets and all that. So McGowan, like you said, Keith, would be a nice fit for the slot and a replacement for Amarian Brown, and a guy who can really run. He was a 100 meter, 200 meter state champion when he was at Lawrence High School. And, he's probably about 5'8", 180 pounds. So he's put together. He's a pretty sturdy guy. He's played a lot of football in 2 years at Vanderbilt. So, again, going back to sort of my point about running backs, I think it's best if you're getting guys in the portal, from the portal, to try to target guys who have played and have experience and are a little more known commodities. And that certainly applies at receiver. And there are obviously a lot of receivers out there. I mean, if you just look at the recruiting rankings any year, there's 50 to 60 guys who are considered 4 stars, and another 200 plus who are ranked and in that 3-star range. So there's always options at that position, which is a good thing for Carolina because they certainly need to replenish that room and give some playmakers to build around Lenore Sellers and try to get this offense back on track in 24.
No doubt. All right, so let's focus on some more guys that have been offered or express interest. Indiana transfer Donovan McCulley, 6'5", 195. South Carolina offered him. He's got 1 year of eligibility this past season, 48 catches, 644 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He's kind of a Tanner McAvoy type guy. Great athlete, was a quarterback, then made the move to wide receiver. How do you think the Gamecocks stand with him? Will Shepard obviously is a guy that I think a lot of teams would love to have from Vanderbilt. You mentioned him. He was their number 1 wide receiver, 6'3", almost 200 pounds. Again, another Louisiana kid. And then Wesley Grimes, 6'2", 187 from Wake Forest. 2 years of eligibility. This past year, 20 catches, 339 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't really honestly have a lot to pass on with those guys. I know the McCulley guy has an offer from Carolina. But yeah, he's a bigger body, 6'5", like 200. So if you look at some of these guys that they're in on with Cyrus Allen, Jade McGowan, or even Brown, they're not quite as big. So if you're looking to get some diversity with the receivers you're targeting, that'd be a good way to go about it. But I don't know that he's got anything planned as far as visiting South Carolina just yet.
All right, so one player that's a familiar last name, Gerald Kilgore, 6', 202 from Tennessee Tech. He's visiting this weekend. He is the older brother of Jalen Kilgore. Played quarterback in high school, was recruited to Tennessee Tech as a quarterback, redshirted, then played in the secondary this past year. I mean, I would think this one and, McGowan would seem like layups. We were leading the Jalen Kilgore bandwagon coming out of high school. He did not disappoint as a freshman. What about his brother Gerald?
Yeah, he's going to be in town, I think just on Saturday. I don't know if he's going to visit any longer than that. He's been to Carolina before. He's joined his brother. He joined his brother on some visits when he was being recruited, when Jalen was being recruited. So certainly familiar with things around town, and I would imagine has met the coaching staff in person before. So yeah, it seems like a layup that they can get Gerald Kilgore. He's gotten several offers since he's entered the portal, most of which are, FCS teams, maybe some group of fives, and West Virginia's offered. But yeah, I think it's probably safe to say at this point that it's looking like he'll end up in a Carolina uniform next season.
I mean, I think you have to like that. Okay, Hale, just quickly, the only offensive lineman that at least I know is visiting South Carolina is Jerquan Scott, 6'4", 330 from Southern Miss. He would be a grad transfer. He's supposed to come in next weekend. How many guys do you think realistically South Carolina is looking to add from the portal? I know Matthew Bedford is a guy they've offered out of Indiana, who they were close to getting out of high school. Justin Mayers, another UTEP guy, an interior guy. And then they just offered the left tackle at San Jose State, a native of Las Vegas named Fernando Carmona Jr., 6'5", 315. Realistically, though, how many guys do you think they'd like to add from the portal?
I would guess one or two. I don't know that it's going to be much more than that. And it seems to me that most of what they're looking at are interior types. But yeah, I would think 1 to 2. And if you think back to what the season looked like with the offensive line, and consider that some of the best players, or probably most of the best players on the team, or about to be on the team, are younger offensive linemen. Probably best to figure out ways to try to bridge the gap where it's needed, because I think most folks understand that it takes a little time for offensive linemen, or defensive linemen for that matter, but any lineman is going to need some time to develop, to get stronger, to get acclimated to the college game. And it doesn't necessarily just happen from the get-go. I mean, we saw Tree Babalade and Trovon Ball play a lot this year, and maybe there are some times when they looked like freshmen, and there are times when they played well, but that's certainly not something that you can sit back and count on immediately when you're talking about young offensive linemen and them playing up to their potential day one. That's a lot to ask.
No doubt. So quickly, 2 linebackers I wanted to ask you about from the portal. Christopher Paul Jr., who is a native of Cordele, Georgia. He's leaving Arkansas with 2 years of eligibility. He was a freshman All-American as a redshirt freshman. He was second in the team in tackles. And then a guy who his film is really good, Javante Mackey, 6'2", 228 from Arkansas State. He would be a guy with 3 years of eligibility. Any traction with those guys?
Yeah, I don't know of any at this point. Paul has already received a couple of crystal balls for Ole Miss since he's entered the portal, and Mackey, trying to do some digging on him as well. Paul too, for that matter. But yeah, still trying to make some sense of what's happening with those guys and what we maybe could expect.
All right, so let's switch gears and get out of the portal and go to high school recruiting and finishing out this class. Last week, the Oracle, Steve Wiltfong, put in a crystal ball for Meridian, Mississippi running back Daniel Hill to South Carolina. How are we feeling about adding Daniel Hill to the class?
Yeah, relatively good. I mean, he's telling the staff all the right things, and they're just trying to make it to the finish line, see if they can sign him. So we'll see. It's been a long time since he's been on South Carolina's campus, and they're Alabama. If there's anything to feel optimistic about, it's that Alabama has been recruiting a bunch of other 2024 running backs over the last couple weeks, month or so. So I would interpret that as them believing they need to start looking at their other options and trying to go another direction. So yeah, I think there's reason for optimism, and that's kind of always been the thing with Daniel Hill over the last 6 to 8 months, maybe a little longer than that, is just cautiously optimistic. That's sort of been the thing, even when it was looking like he was getting ready to commit and thought it was going to be South Carolina, and he didn't commit to anybody. He was still saying all the right things. So as far as his communication with the staff, so we'll see. There's 2 weeks, I guess, before the early signing period, and he's, as far as I know, still planning to announce his thing at the All-American game, the former Army All-American game, now just called the All-American game. So whether that timeline eventually ultimately holds up, we'll see. But I think, again, reason to be cautiously optimistic for South Carolina, especially now. If they can say, hey, the staff can say, hey, we're even more thin at running back now that Mario Anderson's hitting the portal. So come on down, buddy. We got all kinds of carries for you.
That just seems like a very bizarre move unless there are dominoes falling behind the scenes. But we will see.
Yeah.
All right, so Elijah Thurman, offensive lineman, Bradwell Institute, Hinesville, Georgia. Looks like it's going to be South Carolina or Clemson. He's visiting this weekend, along with Jerome Simmons, a big 6'4", 335-pound JUCO defensive tackle from Bamberg. What do we think about those two guys?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say South Carolina's in the driver's seat for Simmons. He's got some lower level teams interested in him. He took an official visit to Louisiana last weekend. Georgia's been involved a little bit, but no official visit is on the books for him. So again, feel pretty good about him. And Elijah Thurman, yeah, I think it's probably a South Carolina or Clemson. He's already taken his official visit to Clemson. This will be his first trip to South Carolina since the summer, I believe. So it's been a while since they've seen him, but I also think he's supposed to announce a decision on Monday. So I'm guessing it'll be one of the two schools, Clemson or Carolina. And I feel good about South Carolina's chances, but it's been a little bit since I've done a little digging to see what the feeling was there. So at least going into the weekend, I think South Carolina's got a pretty good shot with him too.
All right, so two guys the Gamecocks are trying to flip. DeBron Gatling, who's made an official visit to South Carolina, former Texas A&M, a current Texas A&M commit from Alpharetta, Georgia, really good-looking wide receiver, and then Marion defensive back Quaysheed Scott, who is committed to Kentucky. What about those two guys? And then one guy, also a junior college defensive tackle, Malcolm Alcorn Crowder, said he was going to visit last weekend, but all the coaches were at the state championship games on Saturday. He's at Butler County. Did he come in? Are they still trying to be involved with him, or is he kind of off the board?
He didn't visit last weekend. I don't know if he's off the board or not. Scott, feel good about him. He's got an official visit to Kentucky this weekend. And who was the other one that you mentioned?
DeBron Gatling, wide receiver
Gatling
from Milton High School in Alpharetta.
Yeah, I haven't heard much about him recently, but like you said, he took the official visit a few weeks back. I think it was for the Kentucky game, and things seem to have gone well from what I've heard. And I he's committed to A&M still, like you said, but he seemed to be, just based on social media stuff, that he was kind of perturbed by some of the decisions that Mike Elko had made as far as not retaining Damian Craig and all that. So, there's, I guess, probably reason to believe that he may not end up signing with A&M, but who knows? Maybe that new staff will have smoothed things over by now. Like you said, he still says he's committed, so we'll have to take him at his word on that and try to figure out if there's anybody else who's in the mix for him. A few weeks ago there weren't really any schools to speak of. There were some that were trying to get involved, but I don't know that anybody had really gotten any traction with him. So I don't know if that's changed since then or not.
All right, so one more flip candidate as we wrap it up here. Defensive end Cameron Fountain from Atlanta. He visited South Carolina. I was on the sidelines for the Kentucky game. I saw him. And then he says, well, I'm just shutting it down. I'm going to Southern Cal. But there's still been a lot of noise about that. Hale, what's the latest on Cameron Fountain?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have much new to share. It's been a minute since I've gotten any new intel on him to pass along.
All right, and last question as we let you go here. Braden Lee, the 4-star corner from the DMV, will visit Maryland this weekend. Level of concern with him, and then is there anybody else that's committed to South Carolina that you're paying close attention to, like maybe Michael Smith, or maybe it's somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's visiting another school, 2 weeks before signing day or a week and a half before signing day, I'd say there's a level of concern for sure. As far as others, there's been some chatter out there, but nothing I can pass along at this time. No.
All right. Well, Hale, I can't thank you enough. Always appreciate you being with us, and a belated happy birthday to you. Yesterday was your birthday. Hope you had a great time and maybe got to go out for a really good meal or had a nice surprise party or something. And,
I appreciate that. I was able to eat at the best Mexican restaurant in Colombia, Real Mexico. That's my spot. So enjoyed that last night, and here we are back to work. No rest for the weary. I guess I should blame my parents for birthing me when the transfer portal opened. So they should have had the foresight to know this was going to happen. So
that's right. Well, Hale, thanks again for being with us. All the best to you. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
All right, sir. Appreciate you having me.
All right. That is Hale McGranahan from thebigspur.com. When we come back, maybe a few more news and notes, and then we will get into our conversation with the hosts of the Gamecocks Basketball Only podcast, Sumter Link and Bryce Hedgecock right after this commercial message.
If you enjoy listening and watching the Free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter at KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter at Gamecock Pod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/Gamecock Pod Daily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, we are back. Looks like there's kind of some back and forth with Mario Anderson. Some feel this may be a negotiating tactic for NIL, but I mean, for me, I'm not going to be held hostage by a Division II guy. I mean, granted, he played well. But if you can go get Marcus Carroll, he rushed for 1,350 yards last year. Dylan Smothers, a 4-star guy. Evan Pryor, one of the top backs in the country. If you get Rocket Sanders, George Pettaway is a guy who, because of the logjam at running back, he redshirted this year at North Carolina. He's from Virginia, 5'10", 195. He's got 3 to play 3. There's Don Chaney Jr., Deion Haskins, and probably others. I mean, I am definitely not going to be held hostage here. So there's reason to believe this may not be over with Mario Anderson, but if it is, you just go and get another low-cost guy out of the portal that wants to play, okay, and you bring him in. That's the bottom line. To me, you need to hit on wide receivers. Another wide receiver that South Carolina is involved with is wide receiver Andre Green from North Carolina, who's 6'3", 200 with 3 years of eligibility. And, folks, he can play. Tight ends, we didn't really talk about. Tyler Neville, 6'4", 248 from Harvard is coming in this year. But there are 2 portal tight ends, both from Ball State, okay, where Pete Limbo used to be the coach. Brady Hunt, who has been offered, 6'6", 250. He's got 2 years of eligibility. And Tanner Koziel, 6'7", 235. Watch out for them. And Drake Dabney, an all Big 12 tight end from Baylor, 6'5", 250. Watch out for those guys as well. I do think South Carolina would like to add at least one corner in the portal. Couple names. William Lee from Kansas State, who's 6'2", 185. He's a native of St. Louis. And then Keenan Johnson out of Georgia Tech. South Carolina is involved there. Also, an Atlanta native who spent the past couple years at UConn, Mumu Ben Wahad, a lockdown corner who's had an outstanding collegiate career at UConn. All right. Let's jump in with our interview with Sumter and Bryce from the Gamecock Basketball Only podcast. All right, and we're in with the host of the Gamecocks Basketball Only podcast. That is Sumter Link and my man Bryce Hedgecock. You always got to love somebody with the name Cock. And
You know, I'm Walter Bryce Hedgecock. I was very close to being my Uncle Williams, name, and it would have been Williams Bryce, and I could have got a little more headway at the university.
My grandfather's name was Walter.
Well, they also called me in college Walter, Bilo because of Walter's Produce. So,
Bryce, I'm surprised.
Not Mockingbird for Walter White.
Yeah.
Bryce, I'm surprised your dad didn't actually name you Williams Bryce.
I'm surprised too.
If that was doable, I'm actually kind of shocked. And our pal at Furman, Bob Ritchie used to call you Wally, right?
That's right. Bob and I back at North Greenville University.
Oh, in Tigerville.
That's right.
Yes.
But Keith, we appreciate you having us on. We've missed being on, and we're ready to talk about the biggest game of the basketball season, maybe of the last couple of years of Gamecock basketball.
Well, I mean, guys, there's no doubt about it. This game tonight with South Carolina and Clemson, it is for grand supremacy in the state of South Carolina. It's for bragging rights. Both teams are 7-0. I don't know when the last time both South Carolina and Clemson men's basketball played, and they were both undefeated. Clemson, by virtue of a couple of really good wins against UAB and then going to Alabama and knocking off the Crimson Tide. By the way, if Jalen Milroe would have played in that game, Alabama would have won. But the Tide really could not throw it in the ocean. Very ironic from 3 that night. But give Clemson credit. They went on the road, knocked off number 23, Alabama, 85-77. Alabama going into that game was the number 1 offensive team in the country. And they just kind of live by the 3 and die by the 3. And that night, you're not going to beat anybody shooting 11 for 35 from 3. Clemson was really good. This is a good basketball team. They're ranked number 20 in the coaches poll, number 24 in the AP poll. They're ranked number 6 in the real-time RPI. The Gamecocks are number 23 in the net rankings, which came out on Monday. Clemson number 18, South Carolina number 29. And then Clemson also number 28 in the KenPom, South Carolina 54. The good news for South Carolina is, guys, if you have all those same numbers in March, you're going dancing. And so a great start for Lamont Paris's team. And Friday night against GW, they were just on fire. A school record 18 for 35 from downtown. And I think they're going to have to shoot it really well in the toilet that's at Little John in order to go to 8-0.
Well,
Bryce, go ahead. Your thoughts.
Yeah, Keith, Clemson's a good team. Who else is a team? Gamecocks are a good team. We're a dang good team this year. And who would have thought the team that went down to, was it the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, whatever we played in that summer league, and we hit 17, 18 three-pointers in those games against AAU teams from those small countries, that we would see that team this year when it comes to three-point shooting. This team it is fair to say that we're good at hitting at least 10 three-pointers a game unless something crazy happens. And it's coming from not just one guy, two guys, three guys. We have 4 to 5 guys hit a three anytime, and then the other night against George Washington. So, didn't we say this on the pod? There were 7 guys that hit a three-pointer against W. I mean, outside of Josh Gray, I might trust anyone shooting a three-pointer on our team. And maybe BBV. I probably don't trust BBV to hit a three.
All right, so I'll just say this. Stephen Clark cannot continue to stay in the starting lineup.
Keith, was he promised a starting job when he was recruited here?
This is my thought, Keith.
That's Sumter's.
I think he was my conspiracy theory is that he was the first transfer to commit. He committed before Cooper, Stute, or Mack, I believe. And I'm pretty sure Paris was trying to get some guys in the door. He needed some of them to sign. It is my theory is that Paris promised Clark he would start him.
Not accurate.
Okay.
So the only reason he is starting is because Colin Murray Boyles has been sidelined with one of the worst cases of mononucleosis I've been told ever in Columbia. Like his numbers were so alarming. They were very close to calling in infectious disease doctors. He's on the mend now. I mean, he lost 25 pounds and he was like 260 and had gotten chiseled down to 225. And so all that weight he's lost is muscle. And so it's going to be a matter of how quickly can he regain that muscle mass? How quickly can he regain, his explosiveness, his strength in his legs and his upper body? Because he was playing at a very high level. Multiple sources inside the program said he was perhaps their best player in the preseason prior to him contracting mono. He got on the floor for the final 3:43 or whatever it was there. Got a bucket, probably got fouled.
He did.
At least that's what Lamont said. But, I mean, guys, it was raining threes Friday night in Colonial Life Arena, and Meechie Johnson, the last 2 games, has broken completely out of his funk.
Why wasn't he an SEC Player of the Week after his last 2 games?
Well, probably because Notre Dame is really bad, and so is GW. Well,
I'm just telling you, Meechie is the match that starts the fire for this team. If he's hitting threes early, it just makes when BJ Mack gets rolling. And I'll say this, Stute, ever since coming back from Arizona, his three hasn't been being knocked down, but it's not like this team suffers because one person doesn't have their game. Other guys step up. Sumter, what were your thoughts on overall just the team on Friday night?
So Friday night, it's one of the best offensive games we've seen the Carolina men play in a while. I mean, they made a school record 18 threes. They shot, 18 for 35 from three. So they shot over 50%. And when this team's making threes, this team's going to win. The times that we have seen them struggle, there's been a couple of games this season. They haven't lost one yet. There's been a couple of games this season against Virginia Tech in the second half. They got cold. Virginia Tech came back into the game. They held on. There was a couple of times in Phoenix where they were struggling to keep pace a little bit. They had a terrible start against Grand Canyon where they're shooting terribly. And then against Notre Dame, the first 10 minutes of the game, I think only BVV made a field goal. And so it is very much going to be a live by the three-pointer, die by the three-pointer type team that I think we're playing. But they're shooting 40% from three on the season. And that's now not over a small sample size. I mean, that's over 7 games. They are 66 for 165 from three. That's a metric that I think is going to – I think that's a metric of this team. Now, obviously, when they play better teams, when they get into SEC play, that number might come down a little bit. But, guys, this team can shoot. This team can score.
So, no doubt about it. Look, I thought against Notre Dame, they looked like a team that had been off for 9 or 10 days.
Yep.
Yes.
I mean, you could clearly see the rust. Now, Studi, he couldn't play dead in a movie against Notre Dame. But after the game, fans who stayed around said he went back out on the court and went through some shooting drills. Started getting up some shots. He was much better against George Washington, not from three, but he scored. He kind of had like one of those Grand Canyon type of games where he did most of his damage, getting to the free throw line, hitting the mid-range shots, and taking his man off the dribble. But, I mean, you go back to that Virginia Tech game.
He was the man.
South Carolina's not in that game if that doesn't go 5-6 from downtown.
And that Grand Canyon game, I didn't know he had that 10-foot 12 jumper to that game. He was just pure jump shooter that game.
Well, Keith, and I think that's an excellent point. And one of the keys that makes this team different than Carolina basketball teams we've seen in a while is that we have more than one guy that we can rely on. Basically, I trust any, Mac, Michi, Studi, Cooper, and Jacoby Wright. All of those guys, if the game's on the line, I'm cool drawing up a play for any one of them. And for any one of them taking a shot on a needed bucket. And Paris has actually done that. It's been very effective. Virginia Tech, I think he went to Mac for that for the bucket. Grand Canyon. It was Grand Canyon that Jacoby Wright just was like, I've got this. This game's over. With just the last 2 minutes, just 2 big time takes with a fadeaway and then a take at the rim. Obviously, Michi, if we need a bucket, Michi can go out there and get it for us. And so this team's versatile, and it's just something we haven't seen in a while. We've got 5 guys that can score, and we might not even be looking at one of our best players, Murray Boyles, yet.
Keith, how refreshing is it to have a big man that can score anytime he wants in BJ Mack?
Mack is just completely different than any player Carolina's had. You go back in the Frank Martin era, you had a guy like Silva. Then finally, Kotsar, his senior year, was a dependable scorer. He could face up. He could go off the dribble. He could play with his back to the basket. BJ Mack's different because he can pick and pop. He can shoot the above the break threes. I'm sure once you get Colin Murray Boyles back, he could be a spot up corner 3 shooter as well. I like him in the pick and pop, and then I like him in the mid range. He can put it on the deck. He's not afraid to back his man down, which we saw against Virginia Tech when he made the game-winning play. We've seen him do it against Notre Dame time after time to get a bucket. And so it's good. And it's really comforting to me to see Michi Johnson break out of that early season slump from distance. I mean, he really got it going against Notre Dame and then did not cool off at all Friday night against GW. And so for me, those are the two constants, along with Mr. Crunch Time, Jacoby Wright, who is calm, cool, and collected. If you need a bucket, if you need a stop, if you need a guy to put it on the floor and go to the basket and pull up, he can do it. He can knock down free throws. He can knock down the spot up three. But for me, in the short term, because I don't really expect Colin Murray Boyles to be a factor against Clemson. For me, it's going to boil down to not only you've got to have good Meechie Johnson and good BJ Mack, but you've got to have Miles Studi and you've got to get some offensive production and prowess from Zach Davis. Zach Davis, no points against Notre Dame, but he led the team in plus minus.
Great defense. Great defense.
He's a defensive stopper. And against Clemson, when you look at their size of their top 7 guys, okay, PJ Hall, 6'10 and a half, 238. He's their leading scorer. Okay, Ian Schifflin, 6'8", 238. He starts, and then they split the 7 games between 6'10 and a half Chauncey Wiggins and 6'10 Jack Clark. Okay, so Clemson is going to go 6'8", 6'10 or 6'10 and a half. He has a walking double-double, basically, averaging over 21 points per game. He's shooting 56% from 2, 42% from 3, and 79% from the free throw line. 8 rebounds and 2 blocks per game. He's headed towards a first-team All-ACC type season. Your thoughts, guys?
Well, the one thing that's been going for us this year was kind of the 4-guard lineup with BJ Mack. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that against Clemson's size. You kind of hope that Zachary Davis 3 at 6'8", and then having BB in there or Josh Ray or Mack. I don't think we're going to be able to get away with the smaller guard lineup. But on the other end, if you have the many guards in there, can those big men go out there and guard on the pick and roll? Because as you mentioned, BJ Mack from pick and roll 3, I mean, you see it coming, right? He sets the pick and he steps 2-step back and he's there for the 3. Are they going to be able to cover that? And one way to get around that size is Mack plays a lot on the perimeter. You can have guys, you know, the big men on the outside and have Zachary Davis. I hope Zach Davis can learn just to go and dunk. With his size and versatility, give him a pick and go to the basket. I mean, we can do it. It's possible. We're going to have to change a little things, you know, around, I think, to beat Clemson. Of course, we need to keep doing what we're doing and making free throws and hitting threes. But it's possible, but it's going to be hard and a challenge. What do you think, Sumter?
So I definitely agree with you. They're going to have to shoot the ball well. So, and that's how I think you deal with Clemson's size is just keep putting lineups out there where all 5 guys can make an open 3-point shot. And you know, if this team goes 3 for 25 from 3, we're going to lose. You know, like that's just going to happen. But if they shoot 40%, you know, 38%, 45%, like they've shot in some of these games, we're going to be very much in this game. And I think we've got 5. We play 5-man lineups that can all make a 3 because of the flexibility that BJ Mack brings the team. And so I think you run that 4-guard with it depends on if we count Studi as he's listed as a guard on sites, but he's really a wing, a forward. But like the Studi at the 4, Cooper at the 3, Meechie at the 2, Jacoby at the 1. Even if Cooper's playing point guard, you know, bringing the ball up the floor, like maybe put Zach Davis in there, but just keep running that 4-guard with Mack. It's very effective against the size if they're making shots. Other thing they've got to do out in Phoenix, you know, against DePaul, they ended up beating DePaul, but that's probably one of the worst games they've played this season. DePaul stayed in it and stayed in it and stayed in it. They turned the ball over 17 times. Against Grand Canyon, they had double-digit turnovers too. Couldn't pull away from Grand Canyon. Friday night against GW, they had 3. That's going to be one of the keys. Are they to play? They're going to take care of the ball. And if they do, they've got a chance to beat this Clemson team. I'll tell you, if I'm a Clemson fan, I'm nervous about this basketball game.
You should be.
Well, I don't think – I mean, after Clemson beat Alabama, I think their fans are supremely confident. I think they're looking at our schedule. And, you know, for me, I'm losing Stephen Clark from the starting lineup for this game because you can't afford for him to just get absolutely posterized.
He'll get pushed around.
4 minutes. So
yep.
I'm going with Zach Davis, and I'm going with the front line of Studi, Davis, and Mack. And I'm probably posting up Talon Cooper because he's kind of a Drew Holiday, Marcus Smart type guard. He's physical, he's big, and we've seen them post him up. We've seen him play with his back to the basket. And I think
got a good post-up game.
Have to go with the 5 out and try to create dribble penetration and draw help and kick open shooters or get to the basket and then post up Talon Cooper because he's a willing and a great passer. He was 6th in NCAA in assists last year at Minnesota. But to me, it's all going to start on the defensive end. How well can South Carolina defend what will be the biggest front line that, you know, they have had to defend this year? And look, Clemson's shooting the 3, guys. P.J. Hall is 42% from 3. Giraldi, Chase Hunter is 38% from 3. Those are their 3 big volume 3-point shooters. And
Keith, we're going to need to work on that perimeter defense because that defense up on some of those threes. That's something to worry about going into the game for sure.
Well, I mean, look, I just don't really think South Carolina felt threatened on Friday night. When they've had to D it up, like against Grand Canyon, against Virginia Tech, throw it in the ocean. South Carolina has been very good in their man. You know, Lamont Paris is going to throw a zone or a zone trap out there, and I mean tonight it'll be time. But South Carolina, regardless, they're going to have to play up to the level they played against Virginia Tech, in my opinion, to have a chance to keep this within range to make a big shot at the end to potentially pull the upset. Anywhere from 5.5 to 7.5 point underdogs. And this is the only team in the non-con that South Carolina will not be a line favorite in this game.
Well, guess what? We're going to win. Let's just do it. I mean, anything can happen. I want this win so bad after whatever happened this football season. I want this win. Now, you know, Clemson has circled this game since the game last year, the buzzer beater. And remember, P.J. Hall that game played, but he wasn't 100%. So he's going to be looking to bring the heat this game. But I think the X factor in this game is Talon Cooper. The games that we've played really, really well, he's been over 5 assists a game and over 10 points a game. And it wouldn't surprise me. I think Sumter and I have talked about this a lot on our pod, that we think that Talon Cooper was the center on Coastal High School team because him on the box, he can any guard that is a little undersized, maybe the same height as him, but in terms of weight, he can back them down and kiss it off the glass and score. But in these games, have you noticed that a lot of our starters outside of Clark are hitting 10-plus points? We're going to need that and good Jacoby Wright. I mean, a lot of things need to align, but it's possible. It's just going to be a challenge, but I think we're ready for it. And after watching the hype video they posted earlier in the week, made me want to run through a wall for this game.
So, Sumter, what are your thoughts on, the other guys, X Factor guys? To me, like a Benjamin Bozeman-Verdonk, who quite frankly has been a much improved player. Look, he's not going to go out and score 15 points a night, but when you put him in for 15 minutes, he's going to get 7 or 8 rebounds. He's going to, get 1 or 2 offensive stick backs, and he's going to affect the game at both ends. And then, Jacoby Wright and Morris Ugasuk are both playing off the bench, and quite frankly, he has got the length at 6'4", long arms. He was knocking down some shots against GW, and he's pretty good defensively. How do you see this game breaking down, Sumter?
So I did. Obviously, we've got to have good games from Mac and Michi. That goes without saying. But as far as X factors, the one that I have is Jacoby Wright. Is who I think can be an X factor in this game. His minutes I think have actually dropped off a little bit. Like last season, down the stretch, he was playing. Once we hit February, he was averaging 33, 35 minutes a game for this team. And he had some games where he put up 11, 17, 18. In the Alabama game that they went to overtime, he scored 18 points. And I just think that I think he could be due for a breakout game. He's sort of fitting into this sixth man role that he's been in. Even though he probably gets more minutes than Stephen Clark. That's definitely true. I think he could be primed for a breakout game. Hit a couple of big shots for us. Double digit. I don't think he scored double digit points yet this season. If he has, it's only been like 10 or 11. And the other thing, and this is the kid shooting 92.5% from the foul line. Like I think he's missed one on the season. He's 14 for 15 from the line. And so like when it gets tight down the stretch, if they get cold, just Jacoby Wright driving to the basket, getting fouled. That's the game plan. And I can see him being an X factor. The other thing that when you were just talking about how BJ Mack is a different player than South Carolina has ever seen, he's also a big man that just buries his free throws, which is a wonderful thing to see. And I can see this team winning the free throw battle.
Sumter, you mentioned free throws outside of the DePaul game where it was 10 to 24 miserable.
Yeah,
this team is hitting free throws, which is a breath of fresh air from our last 3 coaches combined. We haven't had a team that can have 3 guys or 4 guys shooting over 70%. We would be lucky to have one person shooting over 70% on the year.
We've got a guy, BJ Mack, the guys that have taken our most free throws. Michi might have taken more than Jacoby, but of our 2 of our 3 guys that have taken the most free throws are at 90% between the 2 of them. Like Mac and Michi are 38 for 41 for 42 or 38 for 42. That's incredible.
All right, so I got the full team stats here. And so Michi Johnson is 26 for 37. He got off to a slow start. That's 7%. BJ Mack, 23 for 26, almost automatic. That's 89%. Jacoby Wright, 14 of 15. That's 93%. Talon Duper, 11 of 15, 73%. Miles Studi, just 9 for 16. And Josh Gray, 7 for 15. But as a team, South Carolina's 95 for 135, which is just over 70%. As a team, they're shooting 40% from three and 47% overall as a team. So, if it comes down to it on the free throw line, Clemson is shooting 72%, and they have three guys in their starting lineup that are all over 83%. Ian Shefflin at 83%, but just 10 for 12. And then Chase Hunter, 87%, 13 for 15. Joseph Girard, 14 for 16. And then PJ Hall, 26 for 33. Clemson, just 80 of 111 attempts on the season. And so South Carolina, in the same amount of games, has attempted 24 more free throws. And I think that's what it's going to take. Clemson likes the perimeter jumper. They like the three. Just like Duke transitioning over to women's basketball, they were 10 for 20 going into the fourth quarter on Sunday for three. And Dawn Staley put in this freshman who she had benched earlier in the week. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. Her name's Mylasia Fulwiley.
What? Who?
But she, I thought, was the X factor in the fourth quarter. Ashlyn Jackson could not breathe. She could not even see the basketball. 7 minutes of lockdown defense from Mylasia Fulwiley. Pow was out for a good bit of that time. And Dawn Staley just rode with her. She hit two beautiful driving layups and then had the late dish to Threezy Hall for the final three of the game. And, you want to talk about a team that shoots it. South Carolina, 50% from the field, 60% from three, and 70% from the free throw line. 9 of 11 in the second half after a very shaky first half start. This women's team, number one in the country. They'll face Morgan State. That will tip off an hour before the men's game with Clemson tonight. And then they'll be off to Connecticut to the Mohegan Sun Arena to play Utah in the Hall of Fame Classic. Utah, a top 5 team. They just got some really bad news today. Their top guard, who was shooting 55% from three and averaging season-ending injury. So you always hate to see that.
We always want to play teams with their best players. We don't want any excuses.
I want AZ Fudd when we play UConn, right? Like you want Rakia Jackson when Tennessee, even though they've been getting drilled by 20, and I don't mind.
Yeah, like last season, college basketball was worse off last season because Paige Beckers was hurt. You want to play these teams when they are at their best because we're at our best, and we want to. About Dawn Staley's process with the non-con is she schedules everyone. She's not afraid to play anybody. She's playing UConn, Utah, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Duke, Maryland, just all these big-time schools. And we want these schools at their best, and we want to beat them when they're at their best.
Well, Keith,
no doubt about it. And so,
yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You mentioned Fulwiley. It was interesting on Friday night when she got benched after 2-3 minutes against North Carolina, and it was a couple defensive lapses. I think she had a foul, and then she doesn't play the rest of the game. And then Dawn starting her or playing her most of the fourth quarter with Pow on the bench. You wouldn't have saw that coming come Friday to Sunday, right? And it was great to see this team really shine in that fourth quarter. And, most of the Friday night's game and Sunday night's game, we got Duke and North Carolina's best punch, and we broke through and won. And it was great to see this young team. I guess I call them young. They have a pretty good amount of experience on there, but in terms of proven players, see this team shine early on. But really impressive so far this season.
And here we are, with the North Carolina game. After the game, everybody's talking about how poorly they played and how they were lucky to win on the road at North Carolina. But the key here is that they did win. They did figure out how to win. And Staley played the way we're playing well. Fulwiley was cold. She benched her. And she rolled with Kitts and Ashlyn Watkins down the stretch. And one of the things about this team is that, this was a quote-unquote rebuilding, year. And here they are, 7-0, number one. And all these power teams, that were supposed to just be the greatest season of women's college basketball ever, between Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and Murrow and Haley Van Lith at LSU. Like all these super duper teams, they're losing. They're getting these punches from teams like North Carolina, and they're not figuring out how to win. It's what Dawn Staley has done with the first part of this season. It's incredible. She's already positioned this team back to number one after literally losing basically the entire starting lineup.
And Keith, when these teams try to have a street fight with us, our girls don't back down, and I think we'll fight anyone in the parking lot.
Yeah, I can tell you this right here. If I'm getting in a fight and I'm near the women's basketball team, I'm getting Ashlyn Watkins. Okay, that's who I'm rolling with. Deja Kelly was about 2 seconds away from having every one of her teeth knocked down her throat Thursday night. She just didn't realize it. And you don't want to you don't want to mess with this team. They are not nice. Okay, I can promise you, Fulwiley, you would want her on your side.
Imagine being a freshman last season in Ashlyn Watkins, and literally every day you're guarding, Boston and Cardoso down low. Of course, you're going to get tough. Like this team, the freshies were as tough as any team that we've seen. And the teams that they played the most were the starting lineup now for the Carolina women, and they're just as tough, and it's awesome.
No doubt, guys. 5 players in double figures again yesterday. We've seen this team now in 5 of 7 games have at least 5 players in double figures. On occasion, 6 and even 7 players in double figures. I got a feeling tonight will be another 100-point game, so you'll probably see another 6 or 7 players. But here's what impressed me the most. When South Carolina had to play great defense, they did. In the fourth quarter against Duke, Duke was 3 for 14 from the field and just 1 of 3 from downtown. Against North Carolina, South Carolina came out after the first quarter. They rebounded. They've had rough first quarters. Of course, Malaysia Fulwiley had about a 50-footer. Okay, so the floor is 94 feet. Okay, so 47 feet each side of the midcourt stripe. But when you move to the side, you add more distance, okay? And she was probably at least 6 feet out of the circle over to the left side. That had to be a 48 to 50 foot shot that the bank was open not once, but twice.
It was a double bank.
You know it's good when it hits the backboard twice and goes in.
And how about Chloe Kitts? She has gotten better game after game, and I was wondering why they were starting her at the 4, but now I know why. She is getting more and more dominant, and she's not backing down from a fight either. Between her and Watkins, they're interchangeable on how tough they are, and I think Kitts might have a little bit better scoring than Watkins, but it's a great combo down the stretch at the 4, which going into the season, we didn't really know who was going to play the 4.
Well, I mean, look, you still have a player on the team in Sanaya Fagan who Dawn Staley last year said was the most talented post player on the roster, which included Aaliyah Boston and Camila Cardoso. So I think they're different. I think they're both capable of having big scoring nights. Both are capable of hitting the mid-range. Chloe Kitts has just been pure in the mid-range. She's only run into trouble when she's really tried to force some shots, high school Sally type shots. But to me, the X factor for this team that we have never seen from a Dawn Staley team is the three-point shooting. And Tina Pow and Raven Johnson and Breezy Hall, South Carolina has 3 dependable three-point shooters. And Breezy Hall, she had her coming out party on Tobacco Road in these 2 games with just unbelievable stat lines from downtown in both games. And I'm talking
bucket.
Deep three.
Yes. It reminds you of the at Stanford game last year when we won in overtime. She makes those big 3-pointers. It was just reminding me of that moment this year. She is clutch, and there's nothing else to say about her. When you need her to score or make the big bucket or the silencer, she does it.
Yep, Raven Johnson's also shooting the 3 ball much better than she shot it last season as well. She's shooting 42% on the year, which is a big time improvement over her being afraid to, shoot it in that Iowa game where they were leaving her wide open. But all in, they're shooting almost 38% on the season as a team, and their attempts are up. Like it's fun. It's fun to see a team that can score the ball.
Hey, Keith.
Well, I think when give Tessa Johnson a couple more games, and then you're going to see her. I mean, we are talking about the player who won the McDonald's All-America game 3-point shooting competition. And we saw it against Maryland before the foot injury, before she sprained her ankle. She's just silky smooth. And I think that's the difference. And then you've got Full Wiley, who, look, when it goes up, I don't know if she thinks it knows where it's going. I don't know where it's going. Sometimes it's going in, especially if it's over 30 feet. But sometimes it doesn't hit the rim. Sometimes it goes in. Once she becomes a more dependable 3-point shooter, that's just going to open it up. And I think down the road, you'll see Chloe Kitts expand her game back behind the 3-point line as well. But this is a tough team. They're talented. They're deep. I thought we saw, mostly an 8-9 man rotation on this road trip. Kind of a little surprising me in that saw 2 early stints from Sakima Walker.
What do you think is going on there, Keith, with Walker coming in and Fagan's kind of diminishing the last couple games? Matchups? I think
it's got to do with defense. And either she's going to get the message or she's not. And I also think down the road, Sanaya Ja, her playing time could go up because she is another fearless defender. All right, so it's prediction time. South Carolina, we know they're going to get the win tonight against Morgan State. Sunday, though, against Utah, what will be a hostile crowd because it'll basically be a UConn home court advantage, even though they're not playing South Carolina. Does South Carolina knock off Utah to go undefeated in the non-con?
I think they win by 15 plus.
I think that I think that before Kepkins went down, it was going to be Utah might have had a shot, but now I think they're going to win, and I think they're going to win handily.
And I think they're going to come out strong after coming out maybe not as strong in the last two games. I think you're going to see the team that we saw the first two games of the season. Because Johnson's healthy. Johnson's healthy now, so that's a big difference from the last couple of games when she wasn't. I don't think she's back to full strength yet.
I agree. All right, so to Sumter first and then Bryce, your picks for tonight's game against Clemson.
Cox, baby. Cox by 2.
Ooh.
All right, so you got to give me a score. You can't just say by 2. I mean,
all right. 70,
99 to 97.
Yeah.
78-76, Carolina.
Ooh, I like that. I'm going to go 75-74 Cox on a three-pointer dagger at the buzzer.
Do you have the player that's going to hit the three-pointer dagger, Bryce?
BJ Mack from the top of the key.
That would be epic.
So I'm going to be the lone dissenter, and I'm going to say Clemson 76, South Carolina 69.
I'd still be fine with that.
The inconsistency of Stute and dealing with, their first real hostile road crowd of the year may be too much. But look, this team plays great defense, and nothing, quite frankly, would surprise me, and I hope I'm wrong, but I picked Kentucky to beat South Carolina in football, so maybe that will be a sign of the times.
We are happy to come on your pod and bring your listeners some optimism, Keith.
We're drinking the Kool-Aid, but I will say this. I am more confident going into this game than I thought about preseason.
Yes.
Look, there's no doubt. I mean, look, I really didn't know how good Clemson was going to be, and until I really started digging in at their size and then, watching that game at Alabama. I think the whole key for South Carolina's game tonight is not letting PJ Hall get off early in the game. He's their guy. Like I said, 42% from 21 points per game. If you can keep rolling different guys on him, like BB, BJ Mack, Josh Gray, even maybe cue up the elbows of Stephen Clark and throw him out there a little bit. It's all going to boil down to that. And then South Carolina's X factors, Talon Cooper and Jacoby Wright. I think those two guys will be critical. All right, tell us what you guys have got coming up on the Gamecock Basketball Only podcast.
Well,
when's the next episode dropping?
We're talking all things Gamecock basketball. We'll be dropping one Sunday night late, and we'll be going over the week that was with hopefully a big Carolina win over Clemson, and then we'll cover the Morgan State and Utah games for the ladies, hopefully for another undefeated week. And just like our pod that dropped the other day, undefeated in December sounds pretty nice. Let's keep that going.
And depending on how tonight's game goes, it's possible, if BJ Mack hits a 3-pointer for them to win, what was it, 75-74, Bryce?
Yep.
I have a hunch we might fire up a quick little pod after the game tonight. And
that is fair. We will be having a few beers already ready to rock, and we probably will drop a pod then.
And so but typically Sunday nights, once we're doing one sometime after the women play on Sunday, we do one, wrap up the week, preview the next.
All right, great stuff from Bryce and Sumter, the Gamecock Basketball Only podcast. Check it out wherever you can get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc. Just like today's show, after YouTube, it's going up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you can get your podcast. Guys, I can't thank you enough for joining the show today. It's always great talking hoops with my two dudes from the Gamecocks Basketball Only podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for having us.
All right, that was Sumter Link and Bryce Hedgecock from the Gamecock Basketball Only podcast. So we'll go out first. A sad note, and meant to mention this off the top, and we had the breaking news with Mario Anderson going in the transfer portal. But we used to know him as Baseline Jesus. Then he became known as Gamecock Jesus. Carlton Thompson, who was visible at every basketball game, men's and women's, a super fan, tragically passed away last night, early this morning, at the age of 69 from prostate cancer. And I can speak as someone who has lost members of their family to prostate cancer. Guys, it's very important. Every year, you get your physical, you get your blood work, you get your PSA. All right. Because prostate cancer, the older you become, the higher risk you have of getting it. You really need to start screening when you're 40. And so very sad news for losing Gamecock Genius. This morning when I first heard the news, I thought back to being at Colonial Life Arena, seeing him, a guy that spent his time away from the Gamecocks, serving others as a nurse at the VA hospital. You would see him from time to time with some special guests that were special needs people that he would bring to the games, veterans that he would bring to the games. And his family is definitely in our thoughts and prayers, and Gamecock Heaven is rejoicing because superfan Carlton Thompson is there to lead the cheers and will be leading the cheers from above tonight when the Gamecocks take on the Tigers. 3 more Gamecock players, it looks like, will be returning. Cornerback O'Donnell Fortune and offensive lineman Brashawn Lee and Jalen Nichols. So we will stay on top of the transfer portal. South Carolina right now scheduled to have at least 8 official visitors this weekend. I think that number could grow to by as many as up to 12 to 15 visitors by the end of the week next weekend. You've got offensive lineman Jaquan Scott and defensive tackle from Pitt, DeAndre Jules, 6'3", 310, who is a native of Germantown, Maryland. He will visit. And there'll be a bunch of other guys as well. And I'm just going to go out and say it. I'm putting the number of transfers the Gamecocks get from Texas schools at 1.5 in this cycle. So that's going to be all for today's show. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thanks to everybody for participating in the Nana Sports chat box. As always, God bless and go Gamecocks. I'll be back tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily. I am out of here. God bless. Go Gamecocks. Beat Clemson.